Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to the Heartland Hot Dish podcast. This is where we come to the table and rediscover the connection and meaning to our food and culinary treasures of the Great Lakes region. Join us as we discover the traditions and stories woven into the fabric of the Heartland cuisine, from the iconic dishes that define the Midwest to the hidden gems waiting to be discovered. We'll take you on a mouth-watering journey through the diverse culinary landscape of the Great Lakes area. Get ready to indulge your senses and ignite your appetite as we explore the rich tapestry of flavors that make up the Heartland Hot Dish.
My favorite part about the season is the opportunity to cook soups, right? Being in the kitchen with a big pot and being in that sort of warming place is my happy place.
Are you an excessive maker? Like, will you make those, like, you should be making enough for 4 and you've made enough for 24, or are you just the right amount?
Oh, who makes just soup for 4? That seems insane, right? As long as you've got the pot going, you should be making a plenty, right? It's plentiful. Soup is about bounty for me, and then you can take it and you can freeze it. It's one of those things that freezes beautifully, and then you can thaw it and you have money in the bank.
If I just turned up on your doorstep as a neighbor and brought you soup, would you think I was weird?
I probably.
Okay, my neighbors must think I'm quite strange because I don't freeze it anymore because my freezer has accessed into a place where it's not a place to be
yes,
anymore.
no, that makes sense. But yes.
Yeah, Zsofia, what about you? Are you that soup excess or just the right amount?
Yeah, I love soup. I mean, growing up in Hungary, that's a huge part of your dishes. Soup for breakfast, lunch, dinner. But like during fall and winter time, it's putting a cozy sweater and the smell of the broth. And I love dill. That's one of my favorite. It just warms you up. It's the best thing.
Yeah. So welcome everyone. I've got Daniel here. I've got Zsofia and myself, Kieron. We're really going to delve into like the structure of making a soup is how we name this. And it really is like how you come to that soup. And I think we've got 3 people who will probably go on that journey quite differently. You've listened to our podcast before, and me and Daniel will fall in love and get divorced multiple times during this episode of our love for each other's different foods. Sophie's coming along for that ride to experience that with us, right, Daniel?
Oh yeah, and Zsofia and I are gonna bond over sour cream and soups too.
Oh, absolutely.
I totally know.
I came on the sauerkraut, on the sour cream train now. I feel very good
sure,
about that.
right, yes.
I'm a little scared by Zsophia's love of dill. It's not that I don't love it, but the dill might be a little much for me today, but it's going to be okay.
And you said sauerkraut, it sort of slipped out, but I'm there for that too.
Yeah. Okay, so in starting this time of the year, like when I think of soup, is there one soup that comes to your mind first, like that I'm going to have this? Like if it was your last ever soup or the soup you want to tell people about first, what would it be for you, Daniel?
Well, so I don't know if it's this, that my last ever soup, but I think of the soup of the season, and I think of hard squashes, right? That's the first place that I go, and then I'm not pandering to you. This is not a pandering to Kieron
was a
moment.
pander to
It is
Kieron.
not. It is because it's fall, right? Fall is when the gourds start coming in. We talked about pumpkins. We talked about all that decorative stuff. But like when I start thinking about fall and soups, right? That's what I want to do. I want to take a butternut squash. I want to, spend some time, cut it up. I want to take it, put it in the oven and roast it, and then use that roasted squash as the base of the soup.
Yeah. Before we came on mic, we were talking about soups, and one of the ones comes up is squash and apple soup, and it is the most popular soup we make out at the farm. It is the best soup within the Z-Cob, 100%. Everyone can write a comment underneath this podcast when I say that. It is my love. Like, that thing is great. It is all cream. It's got apples. It's got honey. It's got squash and garlic and shallots in there. What's funny is we do not roast anything.
Right, that was what I was.
Not even.
I was very curious to talk to you about that because that was my memory, right? That you don't roast it, right?
Nope.
That you give up on all of that deliciousness of the Maillard reaction of getting that
Weird, right?
Yeah,
100% strange. We don't even chop the herbs up. We don't do anything. So whole bay leaves, whole sprigs of thyme, rosemary in there, shallots roughly chopped, squash roughly chopped up. You've got heavy cream that's gone in. There is no milk. There's just heavy cream. We used to cook it in glass quart containers and sous vide it just for the consistency of keeping it all in there. Have I totally boiled it or simmered it on the stove? Yeah, we can talk about boiled versus simmer. But brought it to a boil and then simmered it and cooked it on the stove, and it's fine. When you cook it Sous vide, it just stops any of that evaporation, and so then you get to be the exact way you want it to be consistency-wise. And the thing that makes that soup is the Vitamix. Like, if I didn't have a Vitamix, I don't think the soups I love would be loved as much. Like, especially ones we make for the farm and the events we do.
What's interesting is that I actually have a Vitamix, but I do not use it for my soups.
What?
This is where Kieron and
You're
I fall out of
texture
love.
boy, aren't you?
Right.
You're all the texture. Ugh.
Although, right, I'm willing to be convinced, and in fact, I think when I discovered your soup recipe, it was a little bit late in the season for me, so I didn't have a chance to make it.
It's it goes against anything how I cook. You said it, like I'm not roasting things, I'm not sauteing, I'm not getting any of those caramelizations, and it just doesn't need it. And I think
How did that happen? Like, how did that get
got
developed?
old. No, I think there's that bit. There's a Marco Pierre White as a chef, and he had Michelin stars. He handed them back. Ended up running an independent pub. Sorry, this sounds like a weird journey, but he got to a place where he was very comfortable with doing the right amount of work to get the right amount of flavor. I was at a class last night teaching chicken cacciatore, and I had made one 3 days ago. Same recipe, but it had sat and relaxed. It had done everything right. And then I made one in the minute that took less than 30 minutes. It was probably 25 minutes, and we served it. Was there a difference? 100%. Was it enough? Nope.
Yeah.
And I mean that in a loving way. If I was serving it at a wedding at the farm, I'm giving you the rock star version. But the everyday 30-minute one can be good enough. And I feel like that soup came from a place of wanting everyone to make it without having to have that pain. And I like, my staff wouldn't agree, I like not having to have 23 different pans and stoves and things at home. This is a one-hit wonder. And when you do it at home, and if you do sous vide, if you put it in that quart container or that glass container and you put it in there, it's all done. Like, there is something. So, like, I have a recipe that is exactly for that. That is magical.
So thinking about taking extra steps to make something more delicious and whether it's worth it or not, I'm curious to hear both your takes on the idea of making your own chicken stock versus buying broth, in a box or a can or however else.
I would definitely make my own.
I have never, ever once bought any.
It's
Never.
all made.
And that's not an ego thing.
Right.
I think it's an expense thing.
Well, I'm glad to hear
yeah.
that because I'm also team make your own stock.
And it's not, I'm fundamentally cheap and lazy at my heart. I think every chef wants to be, right? Like, it's not that the soup couldn't be better. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's an exceptionally good soup. I mean, when you make it and you blitz that thing up, and the Vitamix does the magic at the end. It's fat. I mean, I've added an inordinate amount of heavy cream and butter has gone into there. It is a fat with a flavor.
Well, fat is flavor.
If fat is flavor,
and it carries the flavor. And
yep, the sweetness that comes from an apple. And when I say we do so little, it is a cut-up apple. That is not de-seeded. It is not peeled. Like, yes, we peel the squash. And we had talked about squash. You had said butternut. And we had talked about, like, I love those Pennsylvania long neck, crook neck squash. It's not the yellow ones that you go earlier in the season because those are also called Pennsylvania squash, but it's the really long butternuts that have a twisted neck. They're slightly meatier. They've got a little bit more substantive taste. It's not sweeter. It's got more of, like, I'm a butternut squash that you think. They aren't grown commercially that are in the supermarkets because they're in pain to pack. But, like, that soup simplicity brings me a lot of joy.
Do you knife peel your squash?
Nope.
No.
I use a French peeler for it.
Yeah.
And I will keep that peel and freeze it. Again, super cheap. Of all the things, like I can't freeze soup. I've got to give it away because my freezer's full of other things. But the skin I will use to flavor other stocks and sauces in there. But it is interesting about the stock. I think I always make it. I'll hold on to bones. So again, we did a class yesterday about roasting chickens and teaching how to use a whole chicken and what it means. I'm not making a stock for every chicken I've produced. I'm making a stock after I've have 5 or 6 bones ready to go. So it might be a week to 2 weeks worth of chickens because in our house, it'll take 2 chickens to feed the family for the week. I'm going to get probably 4 chickens bones together before I'm doing anything, and I'll keep all the bones over the whole journey of what it is, if that makes sense. Are you a buyer? Have you brought?
So,
Yes.
some I have a backup emergency for when we run out of homemade stock, right? But that is dusty and old, and it is there just in case. Because what we do at home is a similar thing. We save our chicken carcasses, throw them in the freezer. I used to be of the mind of doing the stocks on the long, slow simmer for about the 3 hours until I learned about pressure cooking, and now I've pressure cooked the stocks, and then I still do it for about 3 hours because I now do secondary and tertiary stocks.
Yeah.
See, this is where we fall back in love.
This is all the love. So
Right.
I have never. Do you know every chicken stock I've ever made has always gone overnight?
Oh,
I've never just done the 3 hour. I know that there's not a lot of benefit after a period of time. I know.
sure.
But the kitchens I worked in when I first started, that was not how we did it. There's actually, sorry, apparently this is a stock conversation for the day. There's a stock called Jacqueline. Have you ever heard of Jacqueline stock?
I have not.
Okay, so this Daniel sitting opposite me is not the sweet guy. He is the guy that likes fat. He pandered to me with the squash. I'm about to pander him with the fat. It is called Jacqueline stock. You're not going to ask me how to spell that because I'm not going to. And it is a butter chicken stock. I made it in my first ever restaurant, and you would put cases of butter into the chicken stock as you work it, and it would cap it. You'd end up skimming the fat off, and it's flavored with the stock, and you get that as an extra benefit. It rounds out. So it's you've had cocktails that you've like milk washed before,
Or fat washed.
yeah, fat washed.
Yep.
It's the same kind of principle for the stock. It's exceptionally a good stock. Very expensive, super unnecessary. You do save the butter, and you can use it for other things, but
Sure.
it has a chicken flavor at that point of where it is. But Jacqueline stock is the way to go.
I bet it would make incredible matzo balls.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Yes. And it's not the chicken. Sorry, we'll stay at stocks. It's the foundation. We're doing structures of soup.
Structures of soup.
Do you roast bones?
Depends. Sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay, I can respect that.
yeah.
When you roast, do you try to cremate, or are you like a nice roast and then move on?
I try and get as much color on there as
I am like-
but some of it sometimes has to do about time, right?
Yeah.
Like how much time do I have to to dedicate to this process?
So you also mentioned pressure cookers. It's funny. I talked about them the other day. They have that fear of using a pressure cooker. There is,
People have fear of pressure cookers.
oh yeah, of the
Yes.
exploding, 100%.
Right, because it's based on the past when pressure cookers
Correct.
were bad.
They are not as dangerous. Is it something to respect? 100%. I described it to someone recently like, yeah, if you drive really fast on the highway, it's dangerous. If you drive really fast on Autobahn in Germany, you pay attention. In using a pressure cooker, it's safe. I've never known anyone's pressure cooker ever to explode in all the years of being a chef. They're amazing bits of kits. You want to make baked beans, you want to make stock quickly, and it's not even about a shortcut. It is not a shortcut. It is, if anything, an accelerator of getting those extra juices out of it, to get that gelatin that comes out of the bones, to get that flavor out, and 30 minutes to get like a rock star stock. So one of the very first Michelin star restaurants we had mini pressure cookers. And we're talking, these were dangerous.
How small were the mini ones?
I think we would have like 3-quart size.
Okay.
Look at me being American. I just, wow. Oh, my eye twitched. And we would take the bones from the birds that we were serving for them. So we would roast like a pigeon.
Mm-hmm.
The pigeon's resting. We take it off the bone. You put it under the lights to rest. And we'd have 30 minutes to then make the stock from the bones that it was used in. And we did. And it was, that is rockstar baller party bus game.
Although that also sounds very much like any good Chinese restaurant where you order a duck.
Yeah.
Right? Because you'll do that and you can choose how you want the bones.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And do you want it as soup or do you want it sauteed?
Yep.
And it's like, yeah.
So to me, like a pressure cooker stock was a backbone of like the industry of what we did. And at home, it's so good.
Well, and now you have instant pots, right? And you can get the small instant pots, which are probably about 3 quarts, right?
Yep.
And easy peasy and super safe. You don't have to finagle them on the stove, or get the whistles or the bells, or any of the other
What
pieces
do you? So I've got an old American. It's not even old. It's new American standard one, but it's the old simple method. I like the ones that don't have an overly complicated gasket that can really go awry. This is the one with like the metal round disc that you can rotate for the different pressures.
Right, and I've got one of those that's a giant one, and I have the Instant Pot, which is small for the counter, and and most of the time I just use the Instant Pot.
Can't think of the company. I think it starts with a K, and it's an Austrian company. I get my peelers from them and pressure cookers, strangely, and it is a gasket rubber one, but it's so small. That's the thing I use every day. The American standard's like great, I've got 20 bones. I want to make a big old stock and put her down for the...
Right, and the big pressure cooker, if you wanted to pressure can things. Like,
Yep.
That's for that, or... Right, exactly.
I used to be the canner. I thought that was my journey.
I feel like that's another episode.
Yeah, it is. We should do that. I have come so far away from that nowadays. It's kind of sad.
Right.
Okay.
So you're starting soup, you have to start with a good stock. I had another chef friend, shout out to Chef Corey, who would say that his stock was the defining flavor of his cuisine. That this is me. That everything is going to taste like this stock because this is my stock and this is what I use in everything.
I think that's a really true statement of most. And I think that the pinnacle of working a line, and as a chef, I'm not a line cook. I've never been a line cook. I'm a chef. I work stations. You wanted to be the saucier. That was the rock star place. It was the easiest station on some level, but it had to be perfect. And like owning those stocks and sauces and having your mother sauces made, have your mother stocks made that you're going to use to make things, you were a rock star.
It's a good question. Is a soup a sauce?
Ooh, no. We do a class where it's soup to sauce, where we take a soup and turn it into a sauce rather than the other way around, which is kind of funny. Okay, so based of a stock, super happy place. I'm guessing that vegetable stock is a happy place for you. Mushroom stock's a good place in the same way. Those are good base stocks for you.
Mushroom stocks, I usually, will shortcut to doing dried mushrooms and just rehydrating those, and that's my mushroom stock. I'm not sure if, that's
I've kept and dehydrated all the like butts of mushrooms and used that to basically make the same thing of powder. I think vegetable stock is the evil stepchild that gets no attention. That does, and there's a lot of restaurants that make great vegetable stock. Mine is Scrap Town.
Right.
Like,
well, the ones that don't get enough attention are like the old-fashioned ones, veal stock. Nobody makes veal stock, right? And beef stock is a whole nother thing too, right? Chicken stock is the foundation, right? And I really use it in places where one should be using veal stock or maybe even beef stock.
So you asked about stock, and I don't buy it. You know what I do have in my cupboards though, or in my fridge? I have base. Base for days. Base for days or not? Like chicken base, beef base. Do you have them in your fridges or cupboards? Stock cubes?
Stock cubes, no.
Stock cubes?
We do cubes, yes.
Yeah. So
a lot of things, yeah.
So, oh God.
Is it the MSG?
Yeah, it totally is the MSG.
Right. MSG is amazing. Right.
Do you know a company called Kno? This is not an advertisement, and we are not sponsored by them. Kno, they've got the know-how. Do you ever remember that advert? It's a stock company.
Okay.
Marco, you're getting a lot of shout-outs. I worked with him for a brief part. So Marco Pierre White, maybe in the 90s, publicized like seasoning steaks with stock cubes. So it's got all that like MSG, it's got that season, it's got that flavor, and he would season steaks with stock cubes. I love the taste of stock cubes. Oxo is a huge company, or was a huge company, is a huge company. There's a very famous restaurant in the old headquarters in central London of the Oxo company. But they're those little powdered cube beef ones. As a child, again, this is all visceral memories of childhood. That beef stock flavor base is the booster I put in things. I have Bisto in my house, which is a gravy granules, and I have Oxo cubes, and I have Kno. They are all not American. They're hard to get. Thank you, World Market. Again, not sponsored by, but you could if you wanted to. World Market get a lot of European brands in there, or I'll get them from like there's a Scottish bakery in Detroit that ships in a lot of UK stuff in there, and so we'll get some of the stuff from them too.
Yeah, no, I love this idea of rubbing stock cubes on steak, right? Because I am a big proponent of the MSG thing.
100%.
It drives my sister crazy, and we have these just horrible debates about.
I have 2 kilos of MSG in my house right now.
Right, but you're not going to be. It's going to be a harder sell to get somebody to just shake some MSG over it, right? A steak versus right. I grew up in Miami, and in Miami, in the Cuban cuisine, there's all this stuff called sazon completa, right? And sazon completa is effectively, there's other things in there, but it's MSG.
So I think of it like nutritional yeast. It's like that thing, like, oh, what made that so good? It was MSG, and like MSG got such a bad rap in the 90s and 2000s.
Again, different podcast.
So for me, while I don't buy and I make great stock, if there is something missing from a soup at the end, I tend to season with a stock cube, like some kind of stock base.
Oh, that's interesting.
100%. It's the kicker that I want to.
Right. For me, right, instead of that, I will add in some MSG type thing. So some glutamates, but in other forms, right? So so
that's what I'm doing.
Yes,
it's just, and I have this fun memory because that's the bit of like, oh, it's like the blanket of going home.
Right. So, but Worcestershire sauce does that, right? Because Worcestershire sauce has the anchovy.
Right? Yes,
I know. So, right. So that's one of my go-to for finishing. So, right.
I have a gallon of Worcestershire sauce. I have the commercial one in my house. I do not have the little tiny guy. I have
you don't have the Colonel Pabst.
No.
Have the, right.
You buy Liam Perrins though.
I've got the Colonel Pabst. I do, but I also don't use it all that much, right? Like, as I will go for, I know because it adds other types of flavors as well, right? And sometimes those are good, and sometimes those are what you want. But sometimes you just want those base notes to be uplifted.
We deal with a lot of allergies commercially cooking. Commercially sounds so terrible, but professionally cooking, we have to avoid it because of the anchovies. Right? And so you can get Worcestershire sauce without it, but then it's not really Worcestershire.
I don't understand the point. Right?
We will lean into, albeit mushrooms can be also a thing that people don't like, but we use mushroom ketchup a lot, which isn't ketchup consistency. It's more of a liquid that's like Worcestershire sauce, but it's basically mushroom flavored version of it.
Well, so I will use garum colatura too. Right?
Yep.
So for anyone who doesn't know, that's the anchovy extract that is liquid as opposed to that horrible anchovy paste. And it's really nice to use, especially towards the end, because it's liquid and you don't have to melt down the anchovies. It's really easy, and it really gives you that punch of flavor. But I think what we're talking about, just to sort of pull this back and look towards a more higher level view, is right. We're building the structure of soups, so they have to have a good flavor base. They have to have both base notes, right, which is what this this anchovy and MSG stuff just serve deep flavor. But they also need to, I think, have some high notes, right? And I don't think we've talked about although we've alluded to it, because I feel like in your squash soup we're talking about the apples, right? And the herbs
that get in there, the thyme, the rosemary. Those are my They would go with me to the coffin. Those thyme and rosemary are my herbs. Sorry, Zsofia, and the dill makes my eye twitch just a tiny little bit over here. I think that for me, when we talk about those high notes, it's the interesting factor of when I'm building a base soup, where those high notes come in. So garlic is not something you put in the pan first. But there are soups I put garlic in first, and I get that crispy burn, slightly charred flavor of that garlic, and it makes every bone of my chef bone hurt doing it. But God, it makes great soup.
I was just talking about the flavor of burnt/toasted garlic with some colleagues of mine.
I'm not burning it, but I'm coming pretty close.
Yeah, well, and it was interesting because some people have very, very strong reactions, to that.
It's the wrong thing. It makes every part of my professional chef bone hurt doing it. But it's so good.
I think what's funny is that since I grew up, with garlic bagels, as just part of my life, garlic bagels are the flavor of burnt garlic, and because just growing up with that, it feels like a fairly normative thing. I recognize, from a professional taste perspective, that this garlic is burnt. Right?
Well, I feel like it's
acrid. Right.
It's the French bit. I'm not allowed to do that. You can't do that. That's totally the wrong thing. But so when you talk about high notes, it doesn't have to be something that's the end. It can be the starter that's done really well, something that kicks in. I think when we talk about the butternut squash soup that we do, it is the high notes of the acidity that comes in from the apple, the sweetness that comes in from the honey, even the perfuminess. The rosemary and the thyme for me in that becomes the base, albeit if I'm adding it later, or it's toasted later, or it's the salt, because we will make herb salts. I think you've maybe heard me say this before, but we grind all of our herbs with salt. So bay leaf, thyme, rosemary, and the salt that you were going to season with, or MSG, get ground in a little coffee grinder. And then you never have to pull out the bay leaf. You don't have to, again, welcome to Lazy Chef. I don't have to pick all the time. I can roughly chop it. The stems, usually, if they're young, have just as much flavor. It's good. Sure, I'm picking the rosemary and roughly chopping it. I'm taking the central stem out of the bay leaf. That becomes the high note then. But if I put it in the beginning, I put the same mix in, but it starts it, it becomes part of that base that we talked about.
Right.
I think for like the foundation of the soup is, for me, whether it is that the stock-based soup, so you get into like a French onion soup isn't a vegetable soup. It's a stock soup to me. That to me is a stock soup. Really good caramelized onions. It feels much more like a beef sweet and sour soup where you're dropping eggs into it. It's got that kind of flavor. It's got a more stocky flavor. I asked the question in the beginning, and I'm going to come all the way back. The one I love, the one that like I don't make enough, is a really good leek and potato soup. Like a really like stodgy, satisfying. It's got that like, oh yeah, that's what I want on that really the coldest winter day underneath that blanket. The smell of it in the house is reassuring. I mean, as a Brit, potatoes have ruled our lives for far too long. The fact that they didn't exist hundreds of years ago for us is insane.
So I have to ask, when you imagine that good leek and potato soup, are you imagining it as silky or is it chunky?
Oh, chunky as you like. I'm not pureeing that at all. And that's because my mum made it that way. And I think it was always made, she made leek and potato soup, but then we would put in the leftover roast potatoes, and that was the magic that made that soup. But it was disturbingly chunky. It was much more almost, it was a very thick mashed potato that loosely was called a soup at that point of what it is. And it was, again, sorry, like everything you do yesterday becomes top of your mind. It was leeks in there. There was no onions. There was no onion base. It was a leek soup that had garlic in it for sure. It had a splash of Worcestershire sauce because my mum put Worcestershire sauce in everything. But it was super simple, and the great quality of those potatoes at that tail end of the season is the time when you get those good potatoes now. And that smell, that thickness of that's the one that stays with me, that I love. And it was a meal. That for something that doesn't really have a lot of things, it didn't have, I don't think it was a stock-based soup that my mum, the one I'd make for sure isn't. It's a milk-based, if anything. And nothing
interesting. But we were sort of dancing around this other part of the soup too, which is about the heartiness of the soup, right? So we've got the potatoes, which are one way of doing it. We've got cream and butter, which is another way of doing it.
Way to go,
right? But when we're talking, you mentioned the French onion soup, and right, and for me, French onion soup is all about that bread crouton melted with the cheese, and I think it's it's that crouton and it's the bread, and I know that we all have some thoughts on breads in soups.
I think crouton is the best thing ever. It's just, I don't know. I love bread. I love croutons in generally speaking. You put it in the bread, you get that extra crispy taste. That I don't think there's anything wrong with it.
No, and the textures are fabulous because you
the whole soup.
Because not only do you have the crispiness on the top, but it's also then sucking in and absorbing all of that those juices. Yeah, no, it's a delightful part.
Yeah,
right. It's all about that.
That's why I love chicken pot pie soup too, because you have those little cracks.
Chicken pot pie soup. Explain this. Explain this abnormally. I don't know a chicken pot pie soup. Now I would like some. What is it?
It's
exactly what it sounds like.
It's exactly what it sounds like, but I do add. It's all potatoes, obviously. I add beef to it or bacon. It's creamy, and then at the end, I decorate it. I put in croutons because I am a crouton freak person. It's phenomenal. Just like when you go to Potbelly and they have their chicken pot pie, it's the same thing. I just created a soup out of it at home because I love potatoes.
So the croutons soaked in the soup
Yes.
make that sort of up for the crust,
Yes.
right? That's the
Yes.
crusty bit.
Yeah.
So I mentioned it again coming on to Mike. There's a place in Bath, England called Sally Lunn. It's one of the oldest restaurants in the UK. It's like 1482, did I say? I think it was something. It's very close to that number.
Really old.
It's really old. They serve all of their soup in a bread bowl, and it is a very large roll that has been carved out, that the soup is inside, and you serve it that way. It was primarily because back in the day, there wasn't bowls, and that's what you got. And then you got to eat that soaked up bread after. And it is that very like thick, almost waxy roll on the outside that holds together for the, I mean, it has to be that way. I enjoy that to the nth degree, but bread, croutons on things, it's not my thing, but bread to me is a thickener and velveter to a soup. It is not the garnish in my world. So I think that that's something that 100% has disappeared in soup making that's out there, but where you are, the bread has been cut up, it's stale, and it goes into the soup, and it disintegrates the cooking process, and it becomes the thickener. What I like about all the bread, when we talk about heartiness and being in there, it is a way to have, so really good bread goes stale.
Yes.
Really good.
There are no preservatives.
It's not meant to last.
Nope.
And now you just brought, I don't know how much an expensive loaf is. Let's say it's $8 somewhere where you are. A good $8 loaf of bread. And you've had it for 2 days, and it has reached its stale point. Now, there are ways to bring it back. You can run it under some water. You can roast it back in the oven. But you're getting one more day of that. Third day, you still got bread. It's now the win time. Like, that's the time when this thing comes into its own, as it's making fresh croutons for salads or tops of soups or crusting onto a French onion soup as a velvet thickening agent, as a breadcrumb to put in there. It isn't about the waste. It's about the glory of, oh, I've been given this, a third of a loaf of bread gift to now do something good with. And I got to say, like, as the saucier, and I mentioned, like, the cream of the crop, when you got into, this very professional kitchen, you became the saucier. Bread was one of the things that was on your station all the time. We had toasted brown flour to make dark roux with. So that was a thickening agent that we'd use for stock sauces or soups. Bread was always one of those things. And it is a not thin powdered breadcrumbs. This is chunky bits of bread that you throw into a soup, and it gets cooked out. And it does something that no other thickener does. It's almost glossy, and it becomes elegant for something very rough and unappealing going in.
And we're out of the season for this now, but I had noted at the Zingerman's Bakehouse when they make their gazpacho over the summer, there is no bread in there. But the traditional Spanish recipe, as I understand it, involves starting off with stale bread and pounding it with olive oil to make a paste that makes the thickener of that gazpacho.
I love you so much. I had a huge argument maybe a month and a half ago with John Mason, my chef. And I was like, we don't put bread in it because people are gluten-free, and that's why we're here. And he's like, oh, no, you don't put bread in gazpacho. I mean, you put bread in gazpacho. And I said, to be clear, gazpacho is never a tomato soup.
It's a bread soup.
It's a bread soup that contained garlic and olive oil. Mm-hmm. That was it. Gazpacho was never, ever, did it contain tomatoes. Is it delicious and it has turned into this thing? 100%. It's yummy. But its base was always bread soup. And I'm totally good that people want. And a really good gazpacho without bread can be amazing.
Sure.
But with bread...
Some people might argue it's salsa.
It is,
but it's...
It is a salsa.
Right.
At the end of the day, the bread creates the viscosity that becomes super luxurious. And so, yes, 100% you can leave it out. Now, I am a smooth gazpacho guy, though.
Oh, that's interesting.
I know. So, like, I mentioned about being lazy. I'm getting older as a chef, and, like, I think there's something about the joy of not having to obsess about the cut and the process. Like, I will go all through the process of cooking it, but if I have to cut that vegetable so it's presentation level, I would rather you get this very glorious smooth soup than an overly chunky. And a lot of people have textural issues nowadays versus not. And so a super smooth soup is definitely a happy place.
What about a smooth soup but with a chunky garnish?
Nope.
There's no compromise. So when I think about, I'm not sure where your head is, but when I think about bread soups and for this season, right? My head goes to ribollita.
Yeah.
Right, because that is for me, right, one of
On board.
My first
fallen in love
right,
again.
my first fall soup is going to be butternut squash, because that sounds like fall. But when we think about this being the season of the harvest and having all of these vegetables, right, ribollita, for those who are not listening, unsure,
It's
right,
brrr is what
right.
it is.
Right, but it's an Italian vegetable soup, right? There's some beans in there, olive oil, but it has to have that bread in there as well. I think there was a place out in San Francisco that would let the ribollita sit overnight with the bread, and so that it formed essentially almost like a bread galette that then they would pan fry, and you would eat the ribollita on a plate with a fork and a knife. And
Everyone take note of that and go and try that.
Right.
Seriously, that sounds amazing.
It is Delfina. Delfina was the name of the restaurant in San Francisco, and that's where I first experienced it. And yeah, so I make that as much as I can over the course of the season. And that's, I think at that point you're transforming it from something beyond soup, but its starting point is soup.
So the other one that you can go down, I mean, there's the chicken noodle soups,
Mm-hmm.
which isn't my way. If I'm going to put a noodle in there, I like a good spätzle
Mm-hmm.
chicken noodle soup. So the spätzle replaces that and toasted into it. There's also the rice soups. Have you ever had mulligatawny?
Oh yeah.
Oh, a rock star soup that is under, and a good canned Heinz mulligatawny was my childhood.
Oh, that's interesting.
And honestly, there's a lot of good Heinz soups out there. I am not a don't open a can of soup. Soup can be great and it can be a good thing. I don't think you can get it in the US as far as the Heinz mulligatawny, but a Heinz mulligatawny soup, that curry, it's
Right.
basically like
I wonder
a
if you
loose
could get
curry.
it in a South Asian market.
I bet you could.
Yeah.
I've never. So there are many things as a chef you try to imitate from your childhood, and it's never as good because you remember it perfectly. It's this idealized version of mulligatawny soup in my mind, and I have made mulligatawny soup at the farm over the last 10 years of being there. It's my business. I get to have my own recipe of it. I have failed every time. It has never come out the way that Heinz mulligatawny soup. And I definitely have an idealized version of it, but and that is an interesting one because it's like a loose stock soup that has rice and vegetables in it. It's textural, but that curry heat, that happy curry heat is just perfect for it. And the other one's minestrone. And I know that's not this time of the year as much. Maybe it is this time of year because they're heavy tomatoes right now as we come into it.
Yeah.
A great mulligatawny with that oil level and that like you break through the oil level. Like, so there's like a protective oil sheen on the top of a very good minestrone. In fact, it should 100% have that. And it should be pretty substantive. And it almost hides the magic flavors and smells from the soup when you get underneath that minestrone. And then you break through and it literally releases it in a restaurant. And that is its own magical little protective seal.
That sounds right.
How often do you use spatchel?
Oh,
Because
all.
I make my own spatchel. In Hungary, it's nokkedli.
Yeah.
And I would put it in minestrone soup, like
Yep.
100%.
Yep.
Or like goulash, like that kind of like, like soups that you use paprika for.
I make spätzle as far as Cornman a lot. I have taken home fresh homemade spätzle. So it's a drop, for everyone, it's a drop dumpling. You're making a batter, you put it over basically what is a cheese grater, over boiling liquid. As it falls into a tall pot of boiling salted water, it floats, you take it out, you drain it, it cools a little bit, and then you saute it in a ton of butter. Super delicious. I would replace every pasta dish in my world with it tomorrow. And I love pasta. If anyone knows me, pasta is like one of my top 5 things I'm ever going to have. And I would replace everything with fresh spätzle. It's amazing. But not one person in my house likes it.
Oh.
That's
And
interesting.
it drains my soul because it's cheaper, it's easier, it's homemade. It's got nutmeg in it, it's got some semolina, it's got flour, it's got eggs. It's super easy to make.
Very easy and very fast to make.
And it's when it's sauteed in that butter and it fluffs. So they fluff. So you've blanched them, they chill, and then you saute them and they like puff up a little bit, like a rice puff. And it's so satisfying. And they hold, which, again, many things we make in the world don't work like that. That glorious side of that spätzle that's exploded for the soup is that in a chicken noodle soup or even in the melon, it soaks back in that juices. So then when you bite into it, you've still got a little bit of crunch. And it's like this little secret sponge of sweet goodness inside there on top of it. Sorry.
No,
You all go down the spätzle route.
I think that's fine. I think, especially because, you think about the Midwest, we think about our German population, right? I feel like this
100%.
is sort of right, bringing this back to some of the
Flat noodles never have done me for a chicken noodle soup. I've never got that one. The egg noodle piece of they're just so it's heavy, and I guess that's why it's there. It's there to fill you up and sustain you. I've never loved it.
Yeah, for me, I would prefer chicken soup with rice instead of chicken soup with noodles, right? And I think that's a nice little segue into one of the other soup ingredients I like, which is a very Midwestern ingredient, which is that fire parched wild rice that we can get. And I know that it can be shipped to you, and this is the real stuff too. Like it's not it's actually not rice, right? It's more like a grass.
Yep.
Right. Right, and it's a great addition to soup. And if you've never had it before, you can get it shipped to you around the country from Singerman's mail order, and they have it over at the specialty food section in Singerman's Deli.
Yep.
But this is the stuff that's harvested by canoes in Minnesota, right? And
it's real deal. Like it's not, and it's not the cheapest thing. And we talk about it when we talk to people about cooking, and I teach people like you don't need as much. It's so good. You just need a little bit of that magic.
Right. And it's right. It goes a long way. And it's this, maybe a little bit kind of like the croutons, right? That in the soup that it absorbs all of that flavor, right? It's just delightful, plus adding a little bit of its own.
And I think it's, again, Malagatoni soup from Campbell's must have the most awful rice in it ever. I can't imagine what rice they're using. Somehow it holds up. It's stabilizing things that are in there.
It may actually be the best rice ever. Because I remember hearing the story about Campbell's chicken soup and those little teeny tiny carrots that exist in it being the most expensive part of that soup because they've had to develop the carrots that can hold up to the canning process and still taste like carrots and not turn to complete mush.
Because I think like when I've put rice in soup, it's nearly always basmati because I love basmati. And if it's not basmati, it's some kind of long grain rice for me, which is not great in the way it works, and it breaks down. It gets mushy pretty quickly. Like jasmine rice, I'll put in there sometimes as well. But like that rice, that grass is so much better. Texturally holds up. It's not messing around in there. And
it has this earthiness and this nuttiness, right? It's adding flavor as opposed to just being, a filler,
right? So the one you don't get over here, so as far away from Midwest and the Great Lakes area, barley soups. Have you ever had them?
Mushroom barley from the deli is one of my favorite.
Like a good barley soup. Yeah. I mean, that is, maybe it's nothing I'm ever making at home in any substantive way, but if you're like, oh, what would I like? A bowl of comfort? A great barley soup really brings some joy.
Mushroom barley soup is great.
Yeah.
And beef and barley soup, right?
Yeah. How do you feel about lentil?
Oh, lentil? Yeah. What's the... Oh, you have a thing about beans and gas.
I do.
Right, you do.
Right.
I saw that face, and I'm reading between the lines. I know where that's coming from.
Right. So, like, I'm an Indian cook as well. I classically trained French, British everywhere, which basically makes me cook a lot of Indian foods. And so I love dals. Absolutely love a dal. A dal is meant to be enjoyed as it is, and once it turns into a soup, you lose me. I could embrace like a pui lentil, maybe like a PUI lentil, like those little green, tighter disc lentils. The only one that isn't a lentil that I could get on support of is a green split pea soup, which is kind of a lentil. But like once you get into red and yellow, it just like there's better.
Oh.
The flavor doesn't exist. It's not there for that reason.
One of the things that I've as I've bringing this back to the Midwest, as I sort of came here to Southeast Michigan and found all of these pita places, which are effectively like my context for them is they're like our taco shops, right?
Yep.
There, right? These are the places to go in for a quick, inexpensive, tasty bite to eat, and they all have lentil soups, and they're right, and I love them. I think they're delicious.
Sorry.
I know it's right.
We fell out of love again.
We did, right? But it's quick, right? They are right? They're hearty, but you can still sort of suck them down. I usually, because these are takeout joints, right, and everything is in these horrible styrofoam cups. I usually just drink it right out of the bowl.
That you enjoy from that? Like, what's the base flavor? You're like, oh, I think when I'm like, I want a cup of lentil soup. What's your like flavor you're going after?
Yeah, it's the garlic, onion, turmeric, right?
I'll make
ginger,
a garlic, onion, turmeric soup that doesn't have lentils in it.
But I appreciate the lentil. I want that fiber. I want that protein. I want that nutrition, right? And
put sour cream on it too.
Oh, that's interesting.
We haven't gone down I mean, there's a lot of places to go. Like we get into sauerkraut soups. We can get into borscht. Oof.
Right, and
that's not my cup of tea.
And later this afternoon, I'm going down to Hamtramck to pick up some pierogies. Right,
yeah, you are.
Right, and there's definitely going to be sour cream, but it's going to be an opportunity for me.
We need to be sponsored by somebody in sour cream. Is it Daisy's? Is the one we talked about the other day?
Right,
we should reach out to Daisy's. Like we will mention sour cream in every podcast from now until Christmas.
I think that's great, and there may be other sour cream companies more local that I have.
Maybe I don't know
that I also love. That I have yet to discover. But the dill pickle soup is going to be the thing that is also awaiting me there. Right, I've never had it before. I hear people
going to mute my mic and walk away. The two of you can go to town on this discussion. I don't like dill. And I don't like pickles. No, I like cornichons, but a big pickle, not my cup of tea.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be a big pickle.
I
think
suppose
it's going to be chopped up.
Sure,
pickles,
whatever.
Right, fried pickles are fantastic.
Fried pickles are delicious. I can get on board with that. But a pickle just for the sake of a pickle soup, sounds weird, and I'm not there.
And just like, is it the pickled cucumbers? Is it the lard?
I don't know, like dill to me. So I got two things. Dill is smoked salmon. It's gravlax.
Okay.
That's all I think dill's purpose in the world is to do that. And it does a very good job of that. And I'm like, good for you. Good for you, dill. You make great fish. And then I think of pickle, and I think that I want a cornichon. I'm like, you've given me a crappy cornichon, and I just want a cornichon now.
It's interesting. I feel like that's
where my brain goes.
Insult to my people.
No, I as somebody who works in Zingerman's, and do you want an old pickle or a new pickle? I'm like, nope. I want none of your pickles. Can I please have some cornichons?
Largely, I actually avoid the pickle these days because of sodium. I just like the sandwich, food itself, especially in a restaurant, has enough salt in it already.
Yes, we do.
And I do not need a little salt bomb on the side. But
all right, go for this dill pickle. Like what's in there, guys?
Dill pickle soup. We're gonna find out. I'll report back.
Like, do you have any idea what the soup base is? Like what?
I do not.
Okay, so the one that we've not discussed, that's in the Z-Cob, and I know we talk about Zingerman's a lot. The three of us work here, but the one I love that makes my brain hurt is the cheddar ale soup. It shouldn't work.
Oh,
like chef, again, the garlic going in first. The cheddar ale soup, all it wants to do is split. All it wants to do is not operate well. It should fall apart. John Mason, who's now my chef, used to work at the bakehouse and made it all the time. And I've made it. It's in one of the cookbooks the bakehouse has released. It should not work. A cheddar ale soup.
And I actually saw the recipe in the cookbook after having the soup.
Yep.
And I was surprised at how light it was. I was eating this and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to just have a heart attack on the spot. This is just like cream and cheese. And it's not.
And I've made it. The recipe that I've made when I've made it at home, by using the bakehouse cookbook, it's a little looser. So I think the bakehouse one is a bit thicker. Baking a larger batch of something, making a smaller batch is always different. I think the smaller batch one from the cookbook is tiny, a little bit more heat, which I do enjoy. But it shouldn't work. And when I say it shouldn't work, like the beer flavor connected with the cheese and getting a cheese to fully homogenize into a soup with a bechamelish base, with adding a liquid like a beer, it should all fall apart. And honestly, if you go trying to make, without looking at a recipe, go try and make a cheddar ale soup, it won't go well. Like regularly won't go
Cooking
well.
with beer is much trickier than people imagine.
But that soup, as far as in our organization or in the local area, is one. And there are cheddar ale soups out there of the Midwest, and that one is a rock star winner. And they make a turkey urfer chili on the same day, and you do a half and half in them. I'm sure you've had the half.
I've had the half and half.
like that is so good. And I am not like turkey. Ground turkey is not something that's in my life on a regular basis.
No. I it's a funny story. Is I used to judge food competitions, and I did one for a food bank, and the chefs had to cook with things from that food bank, and ground turkey was one of those just like cheap things that they had to work with. So I've had a lot of different ground turkey dishes over my time as part of judging these competitions, but nothing that compares with this turkey chili.
The turkey every chili, and then halfway through the cheddar ale. But I'm telling you, go home and try and make a really good cheddar ale soup just from your base information. I'm going to make a bechamel base. Great.
Why would you do that? Why would you encourage people to do something that they're going to fail at?
It's so hard. Well, I think that the fact that and the beer can be so overwhelming. It can kill everything. But then melting cheese into a liquid and keeping it from granulizing or separating is so hard. And the magic that soup works, and it works every time. And I, to this day, am still amused. And I've been cooking for a long time. I'm 17. Since I was 13, and I'm 42 now. That is a long number of years of cooking. I don't think I could go into a back room and come up with that without 20 attempts.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great soup. All right, we're coming to the end. Well, maybe we're coming to the middle of Soup Town.
Right, where does the time go?
I think that for me, when we talk of the structure of the soup, the big finish, we talked a little bit like the a minestrone that's got an oiled cap. You talked about bread of garnishes. What is your like go-to as far as, and we haven't touched on cold soups. We're going into the fall. We're not talking about cold soup side. No. We'll talk about those way away from today. But like, what is your other garnishes that you've seen or experienced or love into those soups?
Oh, So at the end, right?
Yep.
I use the 5-star Zingerman's fresh cracked pepper. Right, that stuff is amazing. Right, so that drizzle of olive oil, some flaky salt if it still needs it, but even if it doesn't, like it's nice to just have that little bit of crunch. Drizzles of good olive oil, grates of cheese.
Okay.
Right? Fennel pollen.
Yeah, buddy. Right. That's one of my favorite ingredients.
Yeah.
Of all time.
Yeah.
That and sea salt put together, I'm away.
Yeah. Pretty much when we set the table, I ask the family if they put the fennel pollen on the table because
nice. That's a fennel. Again, everyone. Weird ingredient to maybe like. Oh, I've never really. Go get yourself some fennel pollen. You're going to be so happy.
And play with it.
Yeah.
Just have fun.
Sophie, garnish of a soup. The final finish on the top.
Garnish. Well, peppers, absolutely. I love to use parsley, thyme as well.
Okay.
Other than that, I'm not really crazy. My husband is more into garnishing stuff, but I mean, dill is absolutely one of them for me. I love that. We do have a dill. It's called a dill vegetable potato soup with dumplings, and that's one of my favorites. And the stock is what is very huge for me, and that's the vegetable stock.
Yep.
Because in Hungary, we do it out of just the water and then put all sorts of vegetables, onions in there, celery. And then an interesting thing we do in the wintertime is we take the stock that's left with the chicken bones and then we freeze it. And once it's all like frozen, it becomes like a jello.
Yep.
And it's like a dish.
So, do you want my weird one?
Well, I realized I forgot something. I was hoping that Zsofia was going to say it.
Okay, go for it.
Well, I think you know what it is. Right. Yes.
Sorry, I know.
Right.
Like, do you like borscht? Like, actually like it. Like, oh, please, can I get a bowl of borscht?
So I like good borscht. I've had good borscht. I've had bad borscht.
You just lied on.
Yeah, I have not. So I was at the Jewish. In fact, right, I did this Jewish food festival once with my friend Leah, who made the borscht, and I brought the sour cream, and it was fantastic. It was
because you like sour cream. Like,
yeah, I like the borscht. No, because she got it was great seasonal beets, and she made it off of her Germanic grandmother's recipe for it.
Understand, everyone listening, I love beets. Champion of beets. I'm a beet winner. Borscht is not a good soup.
Right. I will try to get Leah's recipe, Leah's grandmother's recipe for the borscht for you.
Okay.
I'm going to make a note.
Do you want my weird ingredient I put on a lot of soups? It's a weird one. And literally any soup is better with it. Preserved lemon.
Oh.
It is so good.
right.
Diced up fine,
That's not weird.
wedges of it.
Yeah.
It is like cream of the crop. I do love a very high quality, very grassy olive oil,
Mhm.
like finished with a soup. Again, it just like wakes everything up. It's a flavor I know. It's very intense, grassiness, and any soup kind of gets that benefit kick from that.
Do you have a go-to grassy olive oil that you? What's the one that you have
No.
right now? What's
I
the
don't know.
Ah.
Like whatever I stole from the farm yesterday. There's
Is it Italian? Is it California?
it's usually Italian. It's not
right.
French. Sorry,
Right.
France.
Is it
It's never-
Southern Italian, like from Puglia, or is it?
It's
like
Puglia. No,
Puglia,
I
right.
think so. There is there was oh god, this is so judgy. Guys, judge me. I've got down at the deli. They've got the two clay pot ones. There's like a white.
Moraglia.
Yeah. So there's a smoky one. One of them smoked.
Oh.
I know.
I think it's not. I don't think it's on the shelf at the moment.
Okay.
But yeah.
Well, there was a smoked one. I still have it. The smoked one, I think smoked things are dumb. But this oil, it is just like cream, like a creamy flavor of grassiness, and to get a little bit of smoke into things.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's not like if you ever use liquid smoke, if you ever experience liquid smoke, it's terrible, and that's not how that gets in there. But like smokiness is like you're hiding something. You have put this in here to hide a bad flavor.
Right. So just to help bolster you a little bit, there's an outfit out of Greece, Daphnis and Chloe, and they make these pepper flakes that they also smoke, and those will also be used as a topping and a garnish for me as well. So I can appreciate bringing in a little bit of smokiness too.
Okay, so like that is a very happy place in my world. I will say that like the things that I really enjoy to like finish something that I want, it's adding another flavor to soups or something, is usually in my fridge. I've got leftover cured meats. Some kind of, salami. There's some leftover prosciutto that's dried out that hasn't been wrapped up, and I'll crispen that. So even salami, sorry, well, the people who make it must hate me, but like put it in the oven, crispen it up so it dries out, and then use those as flakes on top. I think it's not because I don't like the soup I'm about to have, but I'm, again, a hater of the waste. And like, I'm not going to put like 2 slices of dried out prosciutto much anywhere else. And like, I like that. Well,
Eggs.
Sure. Or soup. Soup sounds like a much better place to be. All right, my lovelies. I think we're at the tail end of our soup and structure. I don't know how structured our conversation was, but we got to a happy place at the end of the soups. There will be, and I will add, at least the butternut squash soup. Not the butternuts. You can use butternut squash soup as the butternut squash for our soup, instead of using the long neck Pennsylvania crooknecks.
And maybe a link for the wild rice.
We can do a link for the wild rice. I just want to get a few for as we come into we're getting into our double-digit podcast posting now, to be able to share some of those recipes. I know that our wonderful Daniel is sharing us with a couple of his family recipes for a previous podcast. I'm going to put a couple of those soups out there and some of our fan favorites.
I'll see if I can find the borscht.
Oh, God. I'll just put a line in it so you can't say, I don't want to hate people who love borscht. It's just like there are so many other things that would come higher on that list. There was a guy that works, I was trying to end this, but whatever, we're back here. There was a guy that worked for us called Ephraim. He works out in Manchester at the market out in Manchester. He went to work out there. He was always our butcher, and he loved borscht, and he would make it. And it was a good recipe of borscht. I'm not telling you it was a bad recipe of borscht. But if you're like, could I have a bowl of borscht? No. It's not the name even. It just was like, there are other things I'd rather consume into that word. Sauerkraut soup, I'm on board. It's not even the beet. It was just like, it needs like something else. It needs a bit of extra, some help.
The sour cream.
Yeah. I share a recipe with you.
Oh, lordy.
Zsofia and I have a new project.
Yeah. I just don't think I've had a borscht where I'm like, oh my God, yes.
Right.
I can think of leek and potato soups. I can think of French onion soups that I'm like, oh my God. Soups I'm not even a big fan of. Maybe sauerkraut wouldn't be like, oh my God, in my top 10, but like, I've had a great sauerkraut soup. I've never had a borscht where I'm like, oh yeah, I'm coming back to this one. Daniel has a challenge in front of him. All right, my lovelies. We're going to let you all get back to your day. Go try some of the recipes, share back with us in the comments. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the local soups. Have a great afternoon. Thank you so much, my lovelies, for tuning in and listening to today's episode of the Heartland Hot Dish podcast. Hit that like button, subscribe, and leave us a review. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more listeners just like you. Until next time, keep savoring the flavors of the Heartland and sharing the love for this vibrant community. Take care and stay connected.